strategy to execution. So in this next session, the intranet as an experience anchor panel discussion, Staffbase's principal market strategist, Lara Dobson, will lead a conversation on how to turn your intranet into a driver of real employee experience, not just content destination. She'll be joined by Pinaki Kathiari of Local Wisdom and Preston Lewis of Segal Benz to share practical insights on governance, ownership, AI, and what it takes to deliver faster time to value. Lara, over to you.
Yay, sounds good. I'm live on stage. Cool. Welcome, everyone. My name's, like Lauren said, my name is Lara. I'm the principal market strategist at Staffbase. The conversation we're about to have is obviously super relevant after what Frank just landed on, in that, kind of that changing role of the intranet also requires a lot of really practical changes. So how do you actually go about turning the intranet into an anchor for meaningful employee experiences and not just sort of that destination for information? So, the question I think is very much shifted from, do you have an intranet, a modern intranet, to does your intranet shape how work actually feels day to day for employees and how? So to explore that, today I'm going to be joined by two people who have spent years advising and leading intranet transformation from kind of different vantage points. So first of all, we have Pinaki, who's CEO and founder of Local Wisdom and has worked directly with organizations on communications, digital workplace transformation, culture. And then I've got Preston with me as well, who's a senior vice president of communications and consultant at Segal Benz, brings deep expertise in change and driving adoption inside of complex enterprises. So we're going to talk about the nitty-gritty things like ownership and integrations and AI and time to value. And most importantly, what actually moves the needle on employee experience. So welcome, Pinaki and Preston.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Okay.
Hello,
great.
Thank you.
Cool.
Good to see everybody.
We'll get straight into it because time is of the essence, we know. So maybe I'll just start out with kind of a broad question for both of you. Maybe Pinaki, let's start with you. You work with organizations that are, redefining their digital workplace strategies. And when you kind of hear the phrase, the intranet as an experience anchor, what does that mean for you in practice? And how is that kind of meaningfully different from how intranets have traditionally been positioned?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think it's a very interesting question. I really like the word anchor that you put in there. It's the first time I've kind of heard it in that way. And I felt like I wanted to be careful a little bit because I don't think the intranet in itself or by itself is the anchor for an employee's experience at an organization. I think the anchor is kind of like the people and the experience of what it's like to work together with each other and with the organization. That's kind of what really keeps people there. But I think the intranet connects people and anchors people to the experience, right? And I think that's a distinction because like I've seen, like if your C-suite leadership, something like that is doing something, say, untrustworthy, or there's some kind of strife going around, there's no way the intranet could fill that void by itself. But the intranet can serve as a mechanism to create dialogue, allowing communications to be part of the dialogue in order to heal or set things straight. And it's all true story. I've seen that happen before. So I think the intranet as an experience anchor is a change in mind shift. And I think it was like Frank was talking about it before, like it's always an evolutionary process, right? Imagine that your intranet is like your own app that you're putting out there to the universe, like your own Uber or Cash App or Netflix or whatever, right? So it's a product management approach. And it's something that came up in a conversation with Alexa Rudin and I. Alexa, she's the VP of comms at Alaska Air. And we were talking about this. And we realized that in the last few years, they have evolved their intranet, starting with just the basics. And then they started working on keeping people safe. Then they started working on keeping people informed, then creating a space of belonging. And with all said and done, now they're at a place to experiment and see what happens next. So to answer the question, I think anchors are people. The intranet connects those people, and we're constantly evolving that intranet to better connect people and create a better culture. So I hope that makes sense. throughout
Yeah.
the anchor experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great, I like what you said also about employee experience. Like, I think employee experience is a term, as we're sort of hearing that in the intranet context, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot to be synonymous with kind of the intranet.
It
I think
is.
it's super important to acknowledge always that the intranet in and of itself, or even the digital workplace, really doesn't constitute the totality of the employee's experience. Like, it has to do with a lot of those in-person sorts of interactions and stuff like that too. Preston, what's kind of your
just listening to you talk? I agree, particularly with how awesome of a concept anchor is. Kudos whoever came up with that. I think it's grounding the conversation. No pun intended. Really properly. One of my favorite definitions of experience is a collection of touch points. And when we go through life, we go through work, there's constantly these moments, very unconscious, most often. And it's a collection of those moments, those macro, micro moments, make up an experience, offline, online. And to bring this one home with this great question, it's what an intranet, what we have an opportunity to do with an intranet is ground those touch points, make that much more conscious. And that is, when we say intranet, I think we all can agree that we're talking much more than just the digital channel, digital channel only, right? Today's modern intranet platforms enable us to orchestrate experiences across touch points, not just on a screen and not just on a phone, but on displays, and inform people to have great conversations and create great events, as we were just hearing from Frank. So the way that was set up, I thought that was really well done. And so, it's a big opportunity that today more than ever we can't miss. But if we can do the best we can to define all those touch points and then bring people home with that trusted, secure place where they know they can go and be safe and connect, we're definitely heading in the right direction.
Cool. Great perspectives. Maybe we talked a little bit about experience being more than just the intranet in and of itself. I think one thing that we commonly see, like with the topic of employee experience, but also with intranet, and it's shifted a lot over the past couple of years, is just the topic of ownership and like who actually owns not just the intranet platform, but also the experience. So Preston, maybe we'll stay with this one, with you for this one for a second. In the most successful intranet programs you've seen, who owns the experience, maybe from a platform perspective, but also like the experience in general?
It's another good question. What's interesting when we think about ownership, that we talk a lot about shared ownership. Like, no one owns the employee experience, back to that concept, but it's important to define the shared ownership so that everyone can see what their role is and what they're responsible for, frankly, in maintaining, a channel, a property, however we're framing, say, an intranet. So the owner does depend. I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong answer. I think the biggest point is it does need to be owned. Somebody needs to either be assigned, frankly, or take the responsibility to facilitate the right conversations in and around that shared ownership. The second part of the answer, and I'll go here, is I don't think it should be IT. I'll just say that. Because I feel pretty strongly that, back to that shared ownership piece, even if IT, the function or person is a facilitator, I think it's unrealistic to ask somebody who's responsible for IT platforms, I'm doing overgeneralization, to also take responsibility for content that really fuels the experience across any digital channel. So Pinaki, I'm curious in your thoughts, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. I think the intranet and the experience of that intranet needs to be managed by someone, and someone, I think, needs to take over the reins. And I've seen it happen, like with a number of our clients, from like Pharmavite, I mentioned Alaska Air, even like New Jersey Atlantic Health Systems. They have an amazing intranet function. And in all of those cases, there is an internal comms manager who is responsible for their intranet, and they have taken ownership of it. Also, they have a direct line of connection to leadership, and they have buy-in, and they have support. The intranet is like their baby, and they also treat it like a product where they are evolving it. So they're constantly evolving them over time. And you can kind of see the difference between, an intranet who is cared for like that versus one that has just kind of shared ownership and we're just kind of tossing things into it or at it.
Can I add one thing just to build on that, Pinaki? I think that's a couple of really important points. And to the point around a baby, I don't know if I'm going to stay with that metaphor, but the big point there is that, the intranet does grow and evolve, right? It requires, I think, did you say nurturing? That's the right word. I mean, nurturing that evolution, right? And I think that what's important is that it's not that any owner is responsible for that intranet at that moment in time. What they're really responsible is maintaining that path of evolution. Because when we make commitments about this next feature that's going to be added or this new enhancement on this AI layer for search, we need to not only make the promises, but meet and fulfill them to increase and sustain the trust as in the intranet as that place people need to go for answers. And so, it's really not about today and what it looks like. It's about maintaining those promises and meeting those commitments. And that's what the owner is responsible for above anything else, I think.
Absolutely. The best quote I've heard on that was Glenn Nyback said that he wants to work to make the intranet a place where people want to go so that when leadership or anyone has something to say, people are there ready to take it in.
Those are great perspectives. When you see that ownership is fuzzy, or maybe even provocatively when it is purely owned by IT, what do you think is the first thing that breaks? Like, is it content quality, as we've kind of discussed? Is it the adoption thing, governance?
I think the first thing that breaks is it's almost kind of like you stopped at start, right? You launched an intranet from IT, but there's no comms plan, no adoption, what's next, who's doing what, there's no face behind it. So it feels impersonal, it feels static, it feels like a project and I just checked the box. And I think that's where things would break.
And there's a honeymoon phase, right? Just like in any relationship, you touched on it tonight, like you launch, everyone's excited. It's almost like you have these clouded goggles on because you see all the data for the first bit of time and everyone's all happy and good, but to Pinaki's point, you have to sustain that experience. You have to make sure that that in the plan, the strategy, what comes next is sometimes not more, but just as important as that first impression. And 3 times, 3 different ways, kind of moving through the not just the strategy, not just the roadmap, but truly the experience in a way that addresses the needs and concerns of people over time. Because we all know, I was just coming out of a conversation, we're talking about seasons and cycles. We all know that those exist. And the more that we can align with what's necessary or needed in that season or that cycle, that's what sustains engagement. And I mean engagement in people really going back and engaging with content. Not just viewing, not just clicking likes and commenting, but most importantly saying, hey, this is where you need to go, and kind of spreading that message even offline.
Great. Okay, so let's assume that we do have a clear owner and a path forward, and we talked a little bit about the risk of launching and it having no soul, so to speak, I guess.
You said it.
One other challenge that we see, I think, is that a lot of teams actually stall with their intranet rollout because they're kind of designing for this future perfect state. And if you, maybe we'll start with Pinaki, if you had to force a team to ship something meaningful in the first 90 days, what would it be and what proves that value to employees fast?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do love the concept of evolving rather than a big bang theory, right? So I think if you think about it, right? If you think about any app you love on your phones or you use on your computers, you think about the first version of that app, the first time you ever used it, it could have been years ago. Things have definitely changed. And that's because they're paying attention to you, how you use it, and then changing it over time. And usually these start as a minimum viable product and then they evolve. So for an intranet, the minimum viable product, I think, is just the first thing to strive for is utility, measurement, and governance. And that could include simple news homepage, just so everybody stays informed on the latest that's happening. Links to frequent apps that they use, your front door, the employee directory, so people could connect and find themselves. Basic adoption and content usage metrics, just so you know what's going on. And then governance. From a governance standpoint, I think the first step is about really just making relationships with other departments, so you're establishing your content authors. And then you could kind of grow from there. We could kind of talk about how to take that next step forward and measure, and then next step forward and measure, et cetera. I don't know if that makes sense, or if you have other ways that you would start it off.
It does make sense. And absolutely, I'll take one of those pieces, right? Measurement fuels adequate or effective governance, right? Because we have the data that says this is what we should keep doing or not doing. And I think that governance piece kind of goes really two different ways. Look, when we're building relationships throughout the organization for people that may be responsible for content, let's keep it real simple. We need to make sure that they really feel like it's the best use of their time to keep that content there, to maintain a conversation, with their audiences. And we want to make sure that that is a priority for them. On the other side, when I think of governance, we don't often use the word governance, but I think that also what's important to get right out of the gates is in the user experience, the expectations we're setting for employees. How do we set an expectation to have them help with governance? So more specifically, setting an expectation out of the gates. This is the internet today. We made the point a few minutes ago. It will change. It will evolve. Being proactive with that. And really what you're doing is we're asking for permission that says, keep coming back. Give us your feedback. Let's maintain this flow of conversation. If you're not getting the right news fast, then let us know. And it's not, comment box here. I mean, that's not a bad idea, but it's constantly, sending that text message. When's the last time you visited? Have you seen this? Do you have any feedback? Are you getting through security fast enough? That's often what we see as a concern. But maintaining, what might be preventing people from coming back and being there? When they are, then we can go back to our internal partners and authors and say, look, they're here. Let's make sure that we're delivering what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. David in the chat made a comment about like the intranet. If the intranet is like a baby, it takes a village to raise a child, which I totally agree with, right? Because like as you launch something, you're kind of listening, talking to the village to see how are they working with this intranet, and then you could systematically add new features and functionality over time. And just like Preston said, adding new features and functionality gives you an opportunity to communicate. And it shows that you have an update. We're making this better based on what we heard you say. And it actually, I think, creates a culture that values grace and experimentation. So I think it's one of those things that actually helps create a good culture and a safe culture as well.
I think that both of those are. Oh, sorry, Preston, did you have something to add?
I'd add, because it's an important question, right? We're all, and many that may be participating in this conversation today are looking for relaunching or launching an experience, a digital platform, an experience anchor, and what we also, beyond everything that we just covered, I don't want to miss the obvious, because sometimes we do. Is let's also not miss an opportunity to focus on personalization on day one. Right, people need to feel like this is for me, and although we may add more features and enhancements, and we will, they need to, their first impression of many things needs to feel like this is the place for me, and it's not the same place for everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue, actually. I think it's super valuable, and I actually hadn't thought about it that way, to think about from an admin perspective, like what's the MVP, and kind of, being able to have the metrics there, and having clear ownership with your admin structure and stuff like that. I thought about this like a little bit from the employee experience perspective, I guess. And one thing that we see is like sometimes the first place that organizations will go once they have that intranet in place is the topic of integrations. And that's where things, I think, really get real. Everybody says they want kind of a connected digital workplace, but we've all seen intranets become, dumping grounds of links. So Maybe we'll start with Pinaki. How do you think about integrations without, degrading the experience? And maybe what's an integration mistake that kills experience?
Right on. I like what you said in here, right? Like about the dumping ground for links, because yes, the internet should not be a place for your contents to go and die. is a main thing we've been saying. We've been components of creating integrations and widgets to make it more valuable for your folks, right? I think Frank was saying this earlier, right? How do we kind of make it more like efficient? How do we make people aware? And you do that by making the internet really work to affect productivity and business goals. So like the intranet is more like a concierge and a / personal trainer than just something that's there or you go to, right? It's not just a news site as things evolve. And we've done like a lot of things, like, from compiling like business metrics so they show up on the homepage, or allowing authors to update content spread across the internet just from one location, and so on and so forth. There's so many like add-ons and little connection points with other systems that you could make to create more value in the internet. And now with like agentic AI, I'm so excited to hear the rest of this conference. There's so many more powerful integrations that could be connected. And I think this is the year where everyone I know is working on some kind of experimentation on that AI front. So there's no reason for you to go somewhere else, and somewhere else we could all be able to do it from a single location. And that feels good. The mistake that I feel like people make is just careful of integrating various apps. I think there's a plan, and I think it's never a one and done type of thing, because apps change. And from a technical standpoint, sometimes something that changes in another app in their underlying data is going to affect that integration point. And so you need support, and you need to help manage these types of updates and changes that come across. Just like when Cloudflare goes down and half the world goes offline, we just have to be careful of things like that. And I think that's one thing that people don't think about when they think about integrations.
The worst is when you show up to let's just to an intranet and you've got a card or a piece, or you've got a section that's not working. That's not
exactly.
And that's valuable real estate. We've got somebody there looking for something, and that's just we never want that. I think that also on the integration piece, let's see the obvious levels of integration. There's link out, which is interesting because when as much as we wouldn't necessarily call it an integration, if we want someone to come to a trusted place and not just go to their their Okta or the Microsoft the tile farm, we want to make sure that there's more than just link out. Right. And it also, and we all know link out, especially in that context, misses an opportunity for, what might be the purpose or the categorization of that link. Next is we got integration. So we're pulling content from things. And again, I'm just keeping this really simple. But the third I like to always surface is search integration. Right. So we all know that that's one of the biggest drivers of maintaining that trusted experience. We want people to find what they're looking for faster. On the integration side in the middle, are we able to help people complete tasks faster? And that there's a wide spectrum of tasks, as I just said, or actions. But I think that A, making sure it works all the time is really important. B, it's there for a purpose. That we know we're integrating it not just because we can, but we should. And then it's on that point, not missing the opportunity to say, look, even though we can integrate this, we may not want to, because we know if they click and they go into that and they can get there on one click, that experience is going to be much more rich and much more productive and much more valuable for that person. So I just wanted to share that's a framework that we often use when we kind of break down and prioritize integrations.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful from it's very practical advice, I guess. You both hit a little bit on just the topic of AI, and I know that as a vendor we think a lot about how AI is changing, the concept of integration and the need for interoperability between different systems, definitely. I think generally, though, like from a broader perspective, it's changing how employees search, consume, and even create content, and in some cases kind of bypasses the intranet entirely. So if the intranet then is meant to anchor experience, what role should AI actually play there? And where does it strengthen cohesion versus risk fragmenting the experience further? Maybe Preston, we could start with you.
I feel like, part of the reason why everyone's here is to leave with something they can go implement immediately. So I'm going to try. I know Pinaki, you're doing the same thing. Let's give away as much as we can, right? So people can do just that. My favorite AI frame, let's say the most productive AI framework we're using today is, again, let's dive in a bit. AI in the context of internal communications with creation. This also aligns with the maturity index for using AI for communications functions. So you have creation, conversation, insights, and automation, right? So many of us are beyond creation now. We can use which tool for coming up with the subject line or creating kind of keep going, right? The conversation piece is where we're moving beyond the bot. We're moving soon, and the agentic AI is enabling us to definitely move beyond the bot. And then we move into insights. So it's how can we mine insights and maintain those feedback loops as we talked about, but also provide really valuable data to our authors and others that we partner with and share the responsibility with, and to the organization, knowing that the intranet is a critical place that people go or see or visit. And then on the automation piece, that's where, as communicators, often partnering with many different functions, we're able to say, look, if people are going here, here's what we can do to build more awareness for participating in our AI ecosystem across multiple platforms. So I'll share that, Pinaki. I'm curious on your perspective there, but that's a really kind of helpful way to kind of get your head around based on where you are as an organization, as a company, or even aligning with where you are on the maturity path for using AI.
Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that, because this is really a mind bender, really, the whole thing here, because I think we're thinking about the future while holding on to what we've known in the past, because things are about to change, I think, drastically. I mean, think about the phone. I mean, when we were kids, they were stuck to the wall, and there was a wire between the thing that was stuck to the wall and the part that you put in your face. And then you had to dial numbers to call someone. And if they were on the phone, it would be busy and you couldn't reach them. But think about the phone today. It's in my back pocket. I could do more than just make a phone call. I can make a video phone call. I could watch a video. I could buy something directly from that phone. So when we were thinking about something in the past that was just stuck to the wall and I could do one thing, that is now something that's totally different in my pocket today. And that's what I'm seeing with AI coming into the workplace, right? Since the beginning, it's been gobbling up different tools that we've been using, right? We're going to AI instead of Google. We're going to Nana Banana instead of Photoshop, right? And so what it turns into is we have this huge amount of power now. And it's about trying to synthesize that into what does my organization need now? What do my people need now? And little by little, moving it forward in that way, right? Because we're literally heading into Star Trek land, right? Remember, if I grew up as a kid, I was watching Star Trek, The Next Generation, right? Computer locate Commander Riker, or computer report on status. I feel like that's what we're going to. It's going to be hey, AI, and I'll name it myself, and find a time for me and Lauren to talk about XYZ and schedule that meeting, or check the flights for our preferred airlines between these dates and book the one that's the cheapest. Wild time. So that's the place where we're going. And it's going to be really interesting of how we play, experiment, choose what happens next, and things like that. So I'm excited to sit back and watch, and I'm going to grab some popcorn.
I would do more to grab popcorn. You'd be helping make sure that's got the right flavor of butter on it.
AI, cook me some popcorn.
Well, I was thinking about talking to somebody. I'm traveling right now, and I was talking to somebody I met last night, and it was just really interesting person I just met, and she's a leader of a real interesting company. And we were talking about building teams. She's about to retire, and we're talking about building teams, the stuff we do late night. And she was talking about how, the most important thing, talk about legacy. The most important thing is, those that bring people onto their team that are smarter, that are better, that are faster. They up level everyone. That's how we're thinking about AI. We need to approach using this new technology in a way that says, look, yeah, we're designing roles for teammates and agents that are on our team that at some things are better, are smarter, are faster. And so I think that for all of us, especially as communication leaders and teams, that's the broad stroke kind of perspective that we need to have on the possible. And then, of course, some of us that do that, frankly, will be in that much better of a position to really see through the value that AI can bring all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, I'd say just kind of everyone keep an open mind and like, stay wherever you need to between like hype and apocalypse, because it's still the wild, wild west. But it's just kind of like, when I made that phone analogy, there's just that adage of like when Steve Jobs had the idea for the iPhone, he'd talk to people about it and they're like, nah, just give me a cheaper cell phone bill, right? So they couldn't see past what they've known in the past that way. So keep an open mind.
I think that's super, super fair. I think keeping an open mind whilst also there's that, and then there's also kind of the need to continue amongst all of that change and like trying things out and testing to see what works and stuff. Still that obligation to kind of track an indication of, is this thing still successful or not? So maybe in like a rapid fire kind of situation, I want to make it really practical for both of you. If you could track just one indicator of sort of day-to-day experience impact from the intranet, and these are not vanity metrics, what would it be?
You want to go, Pinaki?
Sure. It was like, wow, I have to choose just one. If I had a magic wand, I'd find some kind of way to listen into everyday talk. I want to hear how many people would say things like, oh, did you see that on the internet? Or you could learn about that on our internet. I just love to hear the stories of how people have used the internet, and including the frustrations, just because, it's funny. It's like, I wonder how the internet is turning into a grounding spot for like the water cooler talk, right? So before, like I wonder if the internet back in the days was the water cooler, right? Because you'd kind of get together and hear things. So I wonder like how the internet is doing to replace that. And I think that would be, for me, a great way to just see how it's working, how it's affecting the organization and the community.
Yeah.
I don't know how I gather that, but like
it's interesting, Rocky. You're touching on. I had two in terms of the indicator. The first one, I'll say it's speed. It's speed. There was this quote I heard the other day at a conference that I still love. That she was saying, the value for us is speed. It's what happens between strategy and implementation. And if that's, and I do feel like in the context of work, intranet as experience anchor means people need something, or we know they may need something. Again, they need something whether they know it or not. And the faster that they can address that concern or identify what it is that they need, then we're successful. And that's truly what we should be measuring if we can. And there are ways that we can, by the way. And then second, you touched on it, is sentiment. If we awesome intranet, just to oversimplify, means trusted. That's where, you're looking for something, go here, right? They're not using the word trust, but they're saying that's where you need to go. It's that valuable of a resource. So those are my two.
Yeah, you summed it up in that trust word right there. Yeah.
I think those are great. I like the balance between qualitative and quantitative indicators.
And magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're getting closer to magical areas, so it could happen.
Yeah. Y'all, we have 1 minute left. So I'm going to try and stick to time, but I think let's kind of end on this, and I'm going to make it a little bit challenging for each of you. In one sentence or less, what is one thing organizations you think will underestimate as the intranet's role is being defined? Pinaki first, and then Preston.
Will underestimate as the intranet's roles gets defined. I think they will underestimate the power and the resources needed to truly make it successful.
I think that position as an underestimation. I don't think the intranet it's not a channel, or even the platform of multiple channels is not a channel. And sure, you could argue or push back, but what I think is missed is or underappreciated is that an intranet is a critical and essential experience and tool that we need to provide to people in our organization to access the information, the other people, and answers that they need to do their best work. It's not a channel.
Well said. The internet is not a channel, just like your iPhone is not your phone, right? It's more than that now.
It's a family member in some cases.
Those are great answers and excellent points to end on, I think. That's what we had in terms of the conversation today. Thank you everyone so much for joining. I think I speak for both Pinaki and Preston to say that they are open and excited to connect with you should you have questions. And yeah, we will leave it then to the next speakers for the next session for